On the planet Zytheria, the sky shimmered with soft, golden light, casting long, warm shadows over the crystal spires of the royal palace. The palace itself was a marvel, towering structures made of translucent materials, reflecting the sunlight in sparkling patterns. It was a place of elegance, order, and tradition, where every surface, every corridor, and every garden had its place. This was the home of Princess Liara, a young Zytherian royal who carried the weight of her people's hopes in every gesture, every word, and every carefully controlled expression. Liara had spent her entire life preparing for her role. From dawn to dusk, she practiced etiquette, memorized diplomatic protocols, and studied the intricate histories of countless alien civilizations. Every move she made, every smile she offered, was calculated. She was flawless in public, graceful in conversation, and disciplined in emotion. Yet, behind her calm exterior, Liara often felt a quiet longing, a curiosity about the world beyond Zytheria, and about the beings who might live on other planets. For generations, Zytherians had kept a careful distance from humans. Humans were considered unpredictable, passionate, and sometimes reckless. The few humans who had been seen in Zytherian space had left lasting impressions, sometimes good, sometimes confusing. Their technology was admired, but their behavior puzzled many. And now, for the first time in decades, a human ship had entered Zytherian territory. The news arrived early one morning, carried by swift data stream messages to the palace. Liara was in her private garden, tending to the azure-leafed blooms that glowed faintly under Zytheria's sun, when her aide arrived. "Princess Liara," said Saren, her chief assistant, bowing slightly. "A human delegation has arrived in our sector. The council requests your presence for the official greeting." Liara's heart skipped a beat, though she forced herself to remain composed. She straightened, smoothing the folds of her ceremonial robe. "How many humans?" she asked, her voice calm and measured. "Only one representative," Saren replied. "A human soldier named Captain Ethan. The council believes this individual is trustworthy and observant. They have requested that the princess meet him personally." Liara's lips curved into a subtle, polite smile, but her mind raced. A human soldier? Here? She had seen humans in historical archives, in recorded communications. They were taller than Zytherians, often unpredictable, and full of emotions that her people carefully controlled. How was she supposed to remain composed in front of one? Her personal attendants guided her through the palace corridors, polished floors reflecting the gentle light above. She kept her head high, her back straight, and her expression neutral yet internally. She wondered what this meeting would bring. She had faced political challenges, ceremonial disasters, and even diplomatic crises. But nothing had prepared her for a human being standing in front of her, with the full weight of their strange, emotional culture. When she entered the grand chamber, where the human had been waiting, she caught sight of him. Captain Ethan stood tall, with a calm posture, wearing a practical uniform that seemed simple to her eyes but carried an air of authority. His gaze was direct, steady, and unexpectedly kind. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that mirrored, yet differed from, the formalities of Zytherian court. Liara felt a flicker of unease. Her training told her to remain unshakable, to hide curiosity, amusement, or doubt. But when Ethan spoke, it was with a voice that was gentle and measured, almost humanly sincere. "Princess Liara," he said, "it is an honor to meet you. I've heard much about Zytherian culture, and I hope to learn more directly from you." Liara's composure wavered for a moment, not from fear, but from the unexpected warmth in his tone. She nodded gracefully. "Captain Ethan, welcome to Zytheria. I trust your journey here was uneventful?" "Uneventful, yes," Ethan replied. "Though I must admit, seeing the palace from orbit was remarkable. Your architecture is unlike anything I've ever seen. Liara felt a small, almost imperceptible smile form at the corner of her lips. As the conversation continued, Ethan asked questions that were simple, yet strangely profound. He inquired about Zetherian customs, about the meaning behind ceremonial attire, and even about the songs sung during royal festivals. Each question was asked with genuine curiosity, without any trace of mockery or condescension. Liara found herself struggling to answer calmly. Every carefully rehearsed phrase seemed inadequate. When Ethan asked about the purpose of ceremonial robes, she realized she didn't want to answer with the standard, scripted explanation. Instead, she found herself explaining the emotions and symbolism behind the colors and patterns, something she had rarely shared outside of private thoughts. The more Ethan listened, the more he seemed fascinated by her words. He nodded thoughtfully, asking follow-up questions that made her consider her own traditions in ways she never had before. For the first time, Liara felt as though she was seen for herself, not just as a princess, not just as a symbol of Zetherian protocol. Meanwhile, the palace advisors observed from behind the ornate columns. They whispered among themselves, their faces tense. Some were worried that Liara's composure might falter, exposing vulnerability. Others were curious about this human and the strange effect he seemed to have on the princess. Liara's thoughts were interrupted when Ethan smiled a small, almost shy expression. "Your people value harmony and balance," he said. "I can see it even in the way you move, the way you speak. It's inspiring." Her heart skipped another beat. Inspiring? To a human? She quickly adjusted her posture, pressing her hands together in the proper gesture of respect. "Thank you, Captain Ethan," she replied, her voice calm, though a strange warmth lingered beneath it. The first meeting continued with polite conversation, but beneath the surface, something new was happening. Liara felt an unfamiliar mixture of admiration, curiosity, and nervousness. She realized that this human, though completely different from her people, possessed qualities that were rare in Zetheria: sincerity, patience, and the ability to see others as they truly were. By the time the meeting concluded, Liara was internally exhausted, not from physical exertion, but from the emotional effort of maintaining composure while feeling genuine interest and surprise. Ethan bowed once more before leaving, his expression calm, yet carrying a sense of respect that touched Liara in ways she could not fully articulate. Afterward, Liara returned to her private chambers, her mind a whirl of thoughts. She glanced at her reflection in the crystal wall, noting the faint blush on her cheeks, a subtle reminder that, despite all her training, she was human enough to feel emotions she could not entirely control. Her aide Saren entered quietly, sensing her princess's unusual mood. "Princess Liara, are you unwell?" she asked, her voice soft, careful. Liara shook her head, forcing a serene expression. "No, Saren. I am simply reflecting on the meeting. That human is unlike any visitor we have ever received." She paused, her voice softening. "I feel as though he sees not only the princess, but the person behind the title." Saren raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She had learned that when a Zytherian princess spoke in this tone, it was better to listen quietly than to interrupt. Liara continued, more to herself than to anyone else. "Perhaps there is much we can learn from humans, if we are willing to step beyond our traditions." Quote, that evening, as the twin moons of Zetheria rose over the palace, Liara walked through the gardens once more. The soft glow of bioluminescent plants lit her path, reflecting in her thoughtful eyes. She considered the meeting with Ethan, recalling his genuine questions, his calm demeanor, and the strange sense of connection she had felt. For the first time in her life, Liara realized that strength was not only in control and discipline. Perhaps true strength also lay in curiosity, openness, and the courage to experience new emotions without fear. The part ended with her standing at the edge of a crystal terrace, gazing at the stars that stretched across the Zetherian sky. Somewhere among them was the human soldier, Captain Ethan, looking at his own planet, unaware of the impact he had made on a princess. Liara took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. She knew that this encounter was only the beginning, and that the days ahead would challenge her in ways she had never imagined. For now, though, she allowed herself one private moment of wonder, a brief, shimmering thought that perhaps two very different worlds could meet, not with conflict, but with understanding. And in that thought, Liara felt the tiniest spark of excitement. She would see Captain Ethan again, and when she did, she knew she would face him not just as a princess, but as someone ready to explore the unknown with an open heart. The following morning, Zetheria's sky glimmered with soft violet light, casting long shadows across the palace gardens. Princess Liara awoke with a sense of restless anticipation. Her encounter with Captain Ethan the previous day had left her mind buzzing with curiosity. She had maintained her composure during their meeting. But now, away from the watchful eyes of the council, she allowed herself to ponder the human soldier's calm, thoughtful demeanor. Why does he make me feel so unsettled? She wondered. Liara's private quarters were filled with tall windows, letting the sunlight dance over the polished floors. She paced gently, the sound of her slippers faint against the crystal tiles. Her thoughts returned again and again to Ethan's questions, how he asked without judgment, how he seemed to genuinely want to understand. Unlike the Zetherian council members, who measured words and actions for political advantage, he was refreshingly honest. Her aide, Saren, appeared quietly. "Princess, the council wishes to know if you will meet the human again," she said. Liara paused, considering the request. She realized she didn't want the council to oversee this next encounter. She wanted the conversation to be free, personal, without protocol suffocating it. "I will meet him," Liara replied, her voice calm, yet carrying a hint of determination. "But only in private, in the lower gardens. No advisors." Saren hesitated, slightly concerned. "Princess, are you certain? Protocol?" Liara shook her head gently. "This is not about protocol, Saren. This is learning." Later that day, Liara descended to the lower gardens, a secluded space filled with strange flora that glowed faintly in shades of blue and green. It was one of her favorite spots, peaceful, removed from the expectations of royal life. Ethan was already there, waiting beside a small pond that reflected the twin suns above. He turned as she approached and offered a polite nod. "Princess Liara," he said warmly. "It's good to see you again." Liara inclined her head. "Captain Ethan, I trust your sleep was sufficient." "Indeed," Ethan replied, "and I am eager to learn more about Zetheria, if you are willing to teach me." Liara felt a small smile tug at her lips. Willing to teach? The phrasing made her feel oddly empowered, as though she were a guide rather than a student of rigid tradition. "Then come," she said, motioning toward the winding paths of the gardens. As they walked, Ethan asked questions that were simple yet probing. "Why do your people value composure above all else? Is it necessary in every situation?" Liara considered this carefully. In Zetheria, emotion was controlled. Displays of vulnerability could be misinterpreted as weakness. "Composure allows us to act with clarity," she explained. "It prevents misunderstandings and ensures our decisions serve the greater good." Ethan listened intently. "I see. On Earth, humans sometimes make decisions based on feeling first, reason second. We risk mistakes, but we also gain connection." He smiled. "Perhaps there is value in both approaches." Liara felt a spark of excitement. For the first time, she was not defending her customs, but exploring them alongside someone else. "And what about mistakes?" she asked. Do humans forgive them easily? Sometimes, Ethan replied with a chuckle. Sometimes we learn slowly. But often, mistakes bring growth. They teach us empathy, creativity, and patience. They reached a quiet grove, where the light filtered through tall, crystal-like trees. Liara paused, her hands brushing against the glowing leaves. I have been taught to avoid mistakes at all cost, she admitted. Perfection is expected. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Perfection is comforting, but it can also be limiting. Curiosity, even when it leads to errors, often teaches more than rigid discipline. Liara felt herself absorbing his words in a way she had never experienced. His perspective was simple, yet profound. The more they talked, the more she realized that humans approached life with an openness that Zetherians rarely allowed themselves. For hours, they wandered the gardens, exchanging stories of their respective worlds. Liara described her childhood in the palace, the lessons in diplomacy, strategy, and ceremonial etiquette. Ethan spoke of his upbringing on Earth, the teamwork, the small victories, and failures that had shaped him into the person he was today. Liara laughed quietly at some of his anecdotes. It was a sound she rarely allowed herself to make in public. Each laugh felt like a tiny rebellion against the rigid expectations she had lived under for years. Ethan noticed, and instead of awkwardly averting his gaze, he smiled warmly. You have a beautiful laugh, princess, he said gently. It seems alive. Liara felt her composure teeter once more. Alive. Yes. That is exactly how I feel when I speak with him. She forced herself to speak evenly. Thank you, Captain Ethan. I appreciate your honesty. As they continued walking, Liara noticed small details about Ethan, how he moved deliberately, but casually, how his eyes seemed to take in everything without judgment. She realized that despite his military training, he was patient and thoughtful in a way that made her feel both challenged and understood. After a while, they reached a small, reflective pond. Liara knelt beside it, tracing patterns in the water with her fingers. On Zetheria, water is a symbol of clarity, she explained. It reflects not only what is above, but what is within. Ethan crouched beside her, his gaze following her movements. And what does it reflect for you? He asked. Liara hesitated. She had never shared such a thought with anyone before. Not with advisors, not with family. Yet something about Ethan made her feel safe. Perhaps. My desire to understand the world beyond Zetheria, to see without the constraints of expectation, to connect, to. Ethan nodded, understanding more than her words, fully expressed. Then, perhaps your reflection is not just the water, but the possibilities you allow yourself to see. Liara felt a quiet warmth in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She realized that Ethan was teaching her not just about humans, but about herself. They spent the rest of the day exploring different parts of the gardens. Liara showed him the luminescent flora that changed color according to mood, explaining how Zetherians used them in ceremonial settings. Ethan, in turn, shared stories of human festivals, where colors, lights, and music expressed emotions openly. Something foreign to her, yet fascinating. At one point, Ethan accidentally stepped too close to a delicate flower. It bent slightly under his weight, its glow dimming momentarily. He froze, worried he had damaged it. Liara laughed softly, reaching out to restore the flower with a gentle touch. Do not worry, she said. Even the most fragile things recover when handled with care. Ethan looked at her, surprised by her patience and grace. I did not expect that. In my world, people often panic at mistakes. Then perhaps your world and mine are different in more ways than one, Liara replied, smiling. As the suns of Zetheria began to set, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, they found a quiet bench, near a cascading waterfall. The sound of water filled the air, serene and calming. For a moment, they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Liara's mind wandered to her feelings, curiosity, admiration, and something more complex she could not yet name. How can I maintain composure when my heart feels so open? She wondered. She realized that for the first time, someone had seen her not as a princess, but as a person with her own thoughts and dreams. Ethan broke the silence. Princess Liara, may I ask something personal? Liara nodded, keeping her posture formal but relaxed. He hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. Do you ever feel trapped by all the expectations? By the rules, the traditions, the constant pressure to be perfect? Liara's hands tightened slightly in her lap. He sees right through me, she thought. She took a deep breath and replied carefully. Yes, at times, the weight of expectations feels heavy, but it is also my duty. My life is not just my own. Ethan nodded, not judging, simply listening. I understand, but maybe, duty doesn't mean you cannot feel, cannot learn, cannot grow. Perhaps being true to yourself is part of your strength. Liara felt a small, radiant warmth. His words were simple, yet they resonated deeply. For the first time, she considered that strength was not only in discipline, but in openness, in curiosity, and in connection. As the twin moons rose, casting a soft silver glow across the gardens, Liara and Ethan continued talking until the stars blanketed the sky. They shared stories of dreams and hopes, of fears and quiet joys. Liara laughed more freely than she had in years. And Ethan admired her not for her title, but for her intelligence, courage, and humanity. By the time the human delegation returned to their ship, Liara felt a mixture of satisfaction and longing. She had learned about human resilience, honesty, and curiosity, and in turn, she had shared a piece of herself that no one else had seen. That night, as Liara prepared for rest, she reflected on the day's events. She realized that her struggle to maintain composure was changing. No longer was it about hiding feelings. It was about embracing them thoughtfully, learning from them, and using them to grow. She looked out over the palace, toward the distant horizon where the human ship waited. Somewhere among the stars, Captain Ethan was looking at his own world, unaware of the impact he had made on her life. Liara allowed herself a small smile, realizing that their connection had opened a door to possibilities she had never imagined. For now, she could only wait for the next encounter, the next conversation, the next moment of learning. But she felt ready to explore, to grow, and to embrace the challenges that would come. Because for the first time, Liara understood that humanity, honesty, curiosity, and kindness could teach even a princess something priceless. The following morning, Zytheria's twin suns rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky with soft streaks of orange and lavender. Princess Liara stood on the balcony of her chambers, gazing at the distant human ship docked near the palace. She could see Captain Ethan preparing for departure, checking his equipment with calm precision. Liara felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, curiosity, and an unexpected flutter of sadness. Their days together had been brief, yet transformative. She had learned to see beyond Zytheria's rigid expectations, to value curiosity and openness, and to embrace feelings she had once suppressed. Ethan had taught her that strength was not only in discipline but also in connection and understanding. Her aide, Saren, appeared quietly beside her. "Princess, the council requests your presence for the final farewell," she said. "They believe it is proper to witness this moment." Liara nodded but shook her head gently. "No, Saren. This farewell is not for them. It is personal. I must see him alone." Saren hesitated but finally bowed. "As you wish, Princess." Descending the palace corridors, Liara made her way to the landing platform where the human delegation was gathering. The air was filled with a quiet hum of machinery and the faint scent of alien flora from the gardens below. Ethan turned as she approached, his gaze softening as he saw her. "Princess Liara," he said, offering a polite nod. "I hope I have not caused you any discomfort during my stay." Liara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "On the contrary, Captain, your presence has been enlightening. I have learned much about your world and about my own." Ethan's brow lifted slightly, intrigued. "Then, perhaps our time together was worthwhile." "Yes," Liara replied, "more than I expected." For a moment, silence hung between them. The usual words of diplomacy and ceremony were unnecessary. Their connection had surpassed protocol. Liara noticed the way Ethan's posture was relaxed, how he observed her with genuine attention. Not as a princess or a mission objective, but as a person. "Before you leave," Liara said softly, "I wish to exchange something with you. Not as a princess, but as someone who has learned from you." Ethan tilted his head curiously. Liara reached into the folds of her ceremonial robe and retrieved a small, polished crystal. It was a rare Zetherian artifact, one that symbolized clarity and reflection. "This is for you," she said, handing it to him. "It reflects not only what is around it, but what is within. I hope it reminds you of the lessons we have shared, and of the connection between our worlds." Ethan accepted the crystal carefully, his fingers brushing against hers for a brief moment. "It is beautiful," he said. "I will treasure it, and I will remember our time together." Liara felt a warmth in her chest. This small gesture, simple as it was, held more meaning than any grand ceremony. She realized that connection was a kind of strength, one that could surpass politics, distance, and even the expectations of royalty. As Ethan prepared to board his vessel, Liara felt her composure tested. Her heart fluttered, a sensation she had not allowed herself to experience in public before. She struggled to maintain her usual grace, but instead of forcing her expression into neutrality, she embraced the emotion, allowing a small, honest smile to emerge. Ethan noticed, and in return, offered a faint, understanding smile. "Princess," he said gently, "your strength is remarkable. Not because you hide your feelings, but because you face them with courage." Liara's eyes shimmered slightly, and she nodded. Before stepping onto his ship, Ethan paused and looked back at her. "Perhaps our worlds are different," he said. "But humans and Zetherians share something important: the desire to understand, to grow, and to connect. You have shown me that clearly." "And you have shown me," Liara replied, "that curiosity and openness are not weaknesses, they are gifts." The ship's engines hummed softly as the human delegation prepared to depart. Liara watched as Ethan boarded, the small crystal clasped carefully in his hand. As the vessel lifted into the sky, her thoughts lingered on the lessons she had learned. She understood now that a leader's strength was not only in command, but in empathy, understanding, and courage to embrace the unknown. Back in her chambers that evening, Liara reflected on their time together. She had laughed more freely than she had in years, shared thoughts she had never spoken aloud, and discovered a new sense of self. She realized that her struggle to maintain composure had evolved into something profound. No longer was it about hiding emotion. It was about balancing duty with personal growth, understanding with empathy. The palace corridors were quiet as she walked through them, her mind replaying moments from the past days. Ethan's sincerity, his calm demeanor, and his curiosity had left an indelible mark. For the first time, Liara felt truly seen not as a princess, but as a person capable of thought, feeling, and growth. Her gaze fell on the crystal she kept on her bedside table, a small reminder of the lessons learned. It reflected the soft glow of Zetheria's moons, shimmering with a faint light that seemed alive. She reached out and touched it gently, feeling a connection that spanned the distance between worlds. In the days that followed, Liara returned to her royal duties with a renewed sense of purpose. Council meetings, diplomatic ceremonies, and strategy sessions no longer felt like burdens. Instead, she approached them with openness and confidence, drawing on the lessons she had learned from a human soldier. She noticed small changes in her interactions with others. Where she once maintained strict formality, she now allowed herself brief moments of warmth and sincerity. Advisors and diplomats noticed, but they could not fault her. Her decisions were wiser, her approach more nuanced, and her leadership stronger than ever before. Liara often found herself gazing at the sky, imagining Ethan looking at his own world. She wondered if he, too, reflected on their time together, on the lessons shared, and the connection formed. Though the human ship was far away, she felt that their bond had created a bridge not only between two individuals, but between two worlds. Weeks passed, and the memory of their conversations continued to inspire her. Liara began to implement small changes in the palace, encouraging openness, curiosity, and dialogue among her people. She shared stories of humans with her closest advisors, not to teach them about another world, but to demonstrate the power of empathy, curiosity, and genuine understanding. One evening, Liara walked alone in the palace gardens, her mind wandering to the waterfall where she and Ethan had shared quiet moments. She smiled, remembering his gentle humor, his thoughtful questions, and the way he had helped her see her own strengths in a new light. Perhaps one day our worlds will meet again, she thought. Perhaps humans and Zetherians will learn even more from each other. And perhaps friendship can span stars as easily as it spans hearts. Liara stood at the edge of a terrace, gazing at the horizon where the stars began to twinkle. The twin moons cast silver light across the gardens, reflecting her contemplative expression. She felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had grown not through force or authority, but through connection, curiosity, and courage. In her heart, she knew that she would never forget Captain Ethan. He had challenged her, inspired her, and shown her the value of embracing the unfamiliar. She understood that the lessons learned in those days would guide her for a lifetime. As she returned to her chambers, Liara allowed herself one last, private thought. Strength was not in hiding emotion, but in facing it with wisdom and courage. And in that knowledge, she felt truly powerful, not just as a princess, but as a leader, a learner, and a human in spirit. The story closed with Liara looking at the stars, imagining Ethan somewhere among them. She smiled. A gentle, confident smile. Ready for the future. Ready to lead Zytheria with open eyes, an open heart, and a mind curious enough to explore the unknown. Though their paths had diverged, the connection between the princess and the human soldier remained a quiet, shining bridge across worlds. And Liara knew, with a sense of certainty and peace, that the lessons she had learned would shape her leadership, her understanding, and her life forever.